Hello and welcome to Patchpod. New series, The Queer Art of Patching. So let's get into this while I unpatch whatever it is I have patched here. This is just me testing out a couple of things which you'll see in the next video of this series. But hello and welcome to the first series of this, I guess, new edition of Patchpod. And within this, it's going to be focusing on my entire workflow for patch creation. And with that being said, I would like to explain exactly what it is that I'm going for throughout this series. And this is going to bring some of you in a bit closer to the ride that I'm going on with my PhD. So let's put it all together. My PhD is called Queer Sonic Identity, and from that, I'm essentially exploring ways of sonifying queerness, which sounds a bit esoteric and crazy even when I say it like that. But when I mean sonifying queerness is I believe that through non-performative and also performative measures, you can express your identity through sound. And with this, we can draw inspiration from a couple of different people. The first person I'm going to talk about today is a man called Luc Ferrari. Now, Luc Ferrari was part of the research group of the Musique Concrète. You might know this from people such as Pierre Schaeffer and others within that space. Now, what Luc Ferrari, one of the reasons Luc Ferrari was so impactful, and to be honest, I believe quite underrated, was Luc Ferrari focused on creating soundscapes, and one of the first people to do so, or name it that at least. Now, with Luc Ferrari's soundscapes, they were recordings of everyday events that were then layered and recontextualized into musical works that represented a portrait or a painting or a soundscape of a very specific moment in time or a very specific person. Now, through this, what Luc Ferrari explored was the idea of autobiographical music. Now, autobiographical music can be thought of as by taking recordings of someone in a natural state of, in a space of non-performativity, you can essentially, by ripping apart the vocal, by diving in and extracting moments of accidentals, etc., you can get the true essence of that person's identity through sound. Now, if we think about that as a beginning of this research, we can take it further. So what I have in front of me here is a modular system. Now, to so many people, what you're looking at here is so alien. This is an instrument that is futuristic. It is beyond the scope of what people would consider a normal musical instrument. And I know this because, well, every time I am, down at the cafe or whatever it might be, and I get asked what I do, and I say that I'm a PhD researcher, or I'm a musician, or I'm a university lecturer for music, they ask me, what do I play? And they go, do you play guitar? Do you play drums? Do you play blah, blah, blah? And the answer is yes, I do play those things, but my primary instrument is what you're looking at right here. And with that being said, I believe that this instrument is a perfect vehicle for expressing that Luc Ferrari idea of autobiographical music that expresses yourself through the breaking apart of sound, through the magnifying of accidents or non-performative functions, essentially, of the human body. Now, with that being said, another part of this whole exploration is to look into some very key researchers in the field of queer theory. And some of those could be Michel Foucault, which I will definitely be utilizing Michel Foucault's thoughts on power dynamics, theories on the social panopticon, for example, or theories on how sexuality moved from oppression into other forms of, identity, and something that you moved from an action that you did. So, for example, me as a gay man, an action that I could take would be to have a sexual relationship with another man. But it moved from that to what you are. It is no longer an act of so-called sodomy, or something along those lines. But now it is my identity. And I want to explore that. I want to know what makes it that. Is this something that I'm purely putting on because that's what I've learned through my lifetime as a person growing up in the 21st century, where queerness is less of an action that you do and more of a thing that you are. So I'm going to be exploring that. Another portion of queer theory, which I'm going to explore, and this leans into some of the works called The Queer Art of Failure by Jack Halberstam. And Jack Halberstam's work is something I found in the beginning of my research and has simply resonated so much with me. Not only does it embrace this idea of failure and how important that can be to finding out new things about your artistry, new things about your identity, all of the above, but it also looks into the idea of queer temporality. And that is what we're going to be exploring in this patch. Now, queer temporality in a short form, which I hate to do, but I'm going to, is this idea that queer people experience life cycle in a different mode or a different trajectory from heteronormative people. And if we think about it on a sort of breaking down of the expectations of heteronormative life versus the expectations of a queer lifetime, it's quite simple to pick up. So, for example, if we have a heteronormative lifespan, we can think of ideas like you are born, you are raised by a loving family, from there you will go to school, you will graduate school, you may have a gap year, you may go to university that's paid for or funded, or a scholarship, something of the above, and then you will meet a girl, or if you're a girl, you'll meet a boy, and then you will get married, have kids, and the cycle kind of begins for your kids. And as you continue on through your life, you'll then go into mortgage, through to retirement, through to, whether it be taken care of until you pass away. Whereas in the queer life forms, and I can only truly speak to being an asexual queer man, but you have so many other things that you need to go through. For example, you may be born into that loving family, you may go to school, and through school you may find a strong challenging of who you are as a person against the norms that are expected by you. So everything that you've seen around you is based on this idea of finding a girl finding a boy, falling in love. But that doesn't work with your identity. That doesn't work with who you are as a person and who you are attracted to. So then you start questioning and wondering, what is it about you that is wrong, that is different? And then you may go through, and depending on your situation, you may get disowned. or throughout the coming out process, which is almost in itself a rebirth or an extra step in the process. You may get disowned from your family, which happens so often to people within the queer community. And then from there, you will need to find new family and a new place to live, new queer kinship, new queer living arrangements, all of those things. Meanwhile, your heteronormative counterparts are in a very comfortable situation often, and are already moving on to things such as marriage, such as kids, such as enter normative expectation here. This doesn't take into consideration as we progress further, or even if we look a little bit backwards, you may face things like the AIDS epidemic, or you may run into, that's still a very real expectation of queer life, is to run into HIV and have to go through the processes of all of these setbacks, these challenges. And then to take it further, the expectation of queer life, lifespan is significantly shorter, just due to all of those things, whether it be self-harm, whether it come down to passing away from illness, passing away from assault, passing away from all of these things. And this is purely from a gay man's perspective. This doesn't even deeply consider like a trans perspective on this very situation, which would be an even shorter life expectancy, even more trials and tribulations. You have coming out, you have a rebirth in the new gender, you have a new puberty, you have so many things. And this queer temporality is something that I'm hoping to explore throughout this patch. Now, this sounds quite esoteric, but how do I even plan on doing this? Well, this is something that I've been sitting on for about a year, and I'm still trying to work out how to do this. So, here are my plans, and I'm going to go through my case and explain to you really what each module is doing. Not super in depth, I don't want it to be super boring, as I'm going to be going through that in my own videos for this series, but I figure let's give you a bit of an idea. Up in the top right corner, this is where we can start. I'll move my camera so you can see it. Up in the top right corner here, we have a module from the brand ADAC, and this is a heart sensing module. Let me grab the heart sensor. So here I have a clip, and this clip goes into the sensor input. Now from this, I didn't have that screwed in properly. In this sensor input, if I was to place this on my finger and allow it just to start picking that up, we can see these red flashing lights at the top, and this is reading my pulse. And from that pulse, I can send that off into the system to actually change the speed of things, to trigger things, to clock different parts of the system. Now, for a very quick way of showing this, I can simply take this and plug into the trigger output. Now, from this, just so it's an easy to see, I'm going to plug this into the freeze option on beads. And you'll see here that the light is flashing perfectly in time with my heartbeat. So, take this off, and you'll see that freeze option there stops. I need to screw that module in correctly. Now, with this, I want to explore creating a patch that works in a rigid time, meaning everything is going to be perfectly clocked, perfectly syncopated for an extended period of time. And this will be done through marbles, which is a random sampler by Mutable Instruments. And from this, we have 3 clock outputs, and the middle clock is quite steady. Now, if I have the jitter knob all the way to the left, it will be working perfectly locked in. And as I slowly turn this to the right, that timing becomes jittery, it becomes randomized, it loses that sort of cyclical rigidity that you would find in a standard clock on a modular system. Now, I'm going to utilize both my heartbeat and whatever tempo it may be in the moment that I'm creating a patch, alongside this jitter to create a challenging to the clock of my entire modular system. And the way that this will work out in a queer temporality standpoint is I will establish essentially a groove of modular synthesis where I have samples and oscillators and filters pinging and playing in a rhythmically locked in timing. And as the song slowly progresses and I'm going through what may be considered a queer life form as a musical form, these timings will shift and they will go from perfect to extremely random and then eventually settle on my pulsed version of, so my heartbeat version of the clock. And I hope that this will represent a going through sort of birth and early childhood, often as with heteronormative expectations and living out a timeline that is perfectly planned for you. And then we will go through a moment of chaos and challenging and essentially randomness where we are not prepared for what queer temporality will throw at us because we've never been taught it throughout our lifetimes. And then eventually we will land back on something that is a bit more steady but is completely clocked by a non-performative version of myself, of my own body, of my own heart. And while I don't want this to get twisted, I don't believe that just my heartbeat is queer purely because I'm queer, but it's this usage of this as a metaphor that I want you to consider as queer. Now, let's go through a few more things in the system and then I'll wrap up this portion because I didn't want this to go for too long, but I figure it's better to let you know what's going on in my plans. So as we move across, we have clouds. This is a classic mutable instruments module. It's a granular synthesizer. It's called a texture synthesizer. And I'm going to go into more about mutable instruments throughout this video series, but mutable instruments is for me, is a perfect representation of queerness in modular, purely because it was created by a trans woman. And there's so many small, intricate, and aesthetic details that, to me, just pushed the boundaries of synthesis beyond its roots and turned it into something new and different. Up next, we also have beads, which is the newer version of clouds. It's slightly different, but I like to have those in here. We have a VCA called veils. We have rings and plats from mutable instruments. Rings being a resonator module that can create bells and drums and strings. It's kind of like a physical modeling synthesizer to a degree. And then we have plats, which is a multi-mode synthesizer and can do anything from drums to vowel, like speaking vowels, through to a DX7 from Yamaha. Over here in the top left, we have Pam's Pro Workout, which is like a clock and modulation source for the system that is also being cited by Ansible, which is an interface between this tool here, which is called Grid. And now Grid just plugs into the system via USB, and I can do sequences and such from this sort of creative toolbox that's in front of me. Now, let's go into the second row, working from the left to right. We have two Just Friends modules. Now, Just Friends are from Mannequins. This is you can think of it as 6 LFOs or 6 voices or 6 envelopes, basically 6 envelope generators. If you're not familiar with what an envelope generator is, it's basically a ramp that goes up and then down, and that up and down can be used to create movement within the system. But one thing about Just Friends is you can put it into sound mode, and in sound mode, it no longer becomes a modulation source of such, but instead becomes a source of sound, which you can create multiple voices across the 6 outputs, and these are being controlled via this grid instrument in front of me, and controlled via the back behind the modules. There is a cable called an I2C cable, and that basically sends note and gate information from Ansible from this into Just Friends, and it will play without any cables, which is extremely beneficial for keeping it in tune. Up next, our other Just Friends. I don't know what I'm going to use it for yet. I usually use it for modulation, but we will see. Then as I step into these 3 Mannequins modules, we have Mangrove, Sisters, and Cold Mac. Mangrove is an oscillator that's based on formant, and just a really nice sounding traditional oscillator. Sisters is a 3-band filter, but also sounds amazing when you turn it into self-oscillation mode as a voice in itself, though I have plenty of voices, so I think that I'll be using it as a filter for this patch. Cold Mac is a confusing module, which I still don't quite understand, but from my understandings, I can use it as a crossfader, I can use it as a CV control voltage hub, which I can send a bunch of CV into and then distribute it around the system and just have one big macro knob that can essentially make a bunch of different changes to all of the different features and modulation sources across the system. So I'm excited to explore that this patch and see what I can come up with. As we move into this corner over here on the right hand side, we have Linnaeus, which is a filter, a beautiful sounding filter. As a filter, I usually compare this with Just Friends, and it kind of gives like a bit crushed energy to the filter. However, this when pinged, meaning sending a gate into the input whilst having the resonance high, creates an absolutely stunning sounding bell or sine wave like instrument. The same thing here goes for the Filter 8 from Jord Analog. This one also has a gorgeous sounding pinged filter. I've actually never used this as a filter. I always use it as an 8-phase oscillator. On the right here, we have a new module from Heimbach and Jord Analog. And in this is a instrument that recreates nuclear test equipment within the modular system. There's an oscillator in here, there is a filter in here, there's a whole bunch of things that I don't quite understand yet, and I really would like to use this opportunity to really see what I can pull out of this module. I know that it can make things extremely ugly and extremely nasty. It can also create melodies and bass lines and drums and all of the above. So what will come from that, I am yet to find out. Okay, into the bottom half of the case, we have Crow over here. Crow is a small 2HP module that I'm going to be utilizing with a monome norms. There'll be more on that in a different video of this series. We have W/ a with module. This is also from Mannequins, and this is a small tape looper, but also can be other things, which I still, again, need to learn and understand. And so much of this process I can't overstate is a journey of learning, because these modules are infinitely deep and I still am yet to know everything about them. So this is a journey that I will be going on with you and throughout my performances, and every performance may change because I might find out new things in my improvisation state. Cool. Up next, I have a quantum rainbow. Now, a quantum rainbow is just a noise source. So we have different colored noise, everything from white, pink, red, gray, blue, purple, and quanta. I just can send these around the case to add a bit of sizzle, a bit of white noise into the sounds. They also work as a wonderful source of random throughout the system, but that is something that we can work through and add over time. Up next, we have a couple of the Buchla tip-top modules, and this is a combination that I've never had in this case before. It's something that I've always wanted to try, but I'm so attached to other modules that I would usually use that I've never put them in here. I don't know if they will last until the final performance, but let's give it a go. From here, we have the quad function generator. Now, the quad function generator is basically 4 envelopes that can cycle, that I can change the length of in attack and release, or in this case, attack and decay. And these are being sent directly out into a low pass gate module. Now, a low pass gate, especially in combo mode, is you ping it. If you have a sound going into it, it'll open this gate up, and in this gate, it'll let the sound through for as long as your envelope is open for, and it will close it, but not just with volume, but also filtering, and that's the key to getting very percussive sounding, like oscillators and bongos from the Buchla world. All right, up next, I have a very small module, 2 HP, and this one is called Nearness. It is very simply a proximity panner, meaning I have on the top and bottom, I have outputs left and right, and between I have, how many? 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 inputs. In the middle, I have a center, and then I can pan things left and right, and it will come out of the left and right in that sort of proximity from center, which is really exciting. I've used it a whole bunch in the past. I usually use it with just friends and spread the voices across that area, which is very likely how I will use it in this patch. Up next, I have R-bar, and in the next video, I go through a whole sort of workflow that I use Instrio's R-bar for. Usually, I utilize it as a polyphonic sound source within my system. Next, I have Mimeophone. Now, Mimeophone is a make noise tape looper, or like a tape delay style thing that can go all the way up into audio rate. I'm just going to be using this as an effects end from my performance mixer, and this is going to be essentially my delay for the performance. This case formation for me is actually very different to how I usually work. I usually have far more effects in my case. As it currently stands, I only really have beads, clouds, and mimeophone. And that kind of scares me just a little bit. But I believe that I don't need to have as many effects this time around for what I'm hoping to do. But again, we will see. I might even have to add a pedal on in the end. But bringing a pedal to Japan is something that I'm cautious of doing just because I don't want to bring too much stuff. So we will play this by ear. But bottom row, as I already mentioned, we have the performance mixer. Very simple. It is an 8-channel mixing desk within Modular, and it has 2 effects ends that I can send to. It has a whole bunch of modulation options as well. So I will be utilizing this for my mixing. In the middle here, I have an extra sequencer, which I usually don't utilize if I'm using Monome Grid. And this is Renee from Make Noise. Now I'm utilizing this as an interface between CV here and my ER301 sound computer, which is going to be creating a lot of my sounds for this performance, as you'll find in the next video, where I record a whole bunch of samples and bring them over into the ER301 and the R-bar, and from there I will be creating this would be my sequencing sources for the ER301, where I can create melodies and rhythms in here directly from here as a hands-on tactility. Cool. I guess that is a perfect wrap, and it's gone for half an hour, just as I want all of my videos to do. If you're interested in seeing where this goes, please make sure you do all the likey, subscribey things to the channel, as well as check out my Instagram for any videos from the performances. All right. As you can see on the little TV here, thank you very much, and I'll catch you next time.